Recently, Deltarune Chapters 3 and 4 came out, and let me tell you, dodging spoilers online was like I was playing the game in real time. Meanwhile, while I didn't actively die, I did get hit and I had some things spoiled for me. I got to dive into Chapter 3 on day 1, but Chapter 4? Life got in the way. Now that I've played both, I'm here to talk about something Deltarune does better than most RPGs. Messing with your idea of choice. Choice in video games is always a weird thing to talk about, mainly because a lot of the time your choices go into the trash. That's because of the limitations of the medium. That isn't to say there isn't any choice being allowed. Hell, you only need to look at things like visual novels, or listening to your tie.
Sounds like a responsibility! You don't like those!
There's my cue.
Or celebrating winning the lottery! There's tons of ways to go about choice in games, but even then, there's always going to be some choices in games that will not really be available. It's pretty much impossible for developers to take into account every single thing that the players will want to do or choose. But I like to think that as long as you're not dishonest about the choices in your game, there isn't a problem. Like, if I pick the option to walk away from a character, I expect to walk away, not jump on them and dig into them. That brings us to Deltarune. A game that, despite being an ongoing game since 2018, damn, feeling old yet? Despite it being an ongoing game, it's been in the public consciousness for a good while now, and with the release of Chapters 3 and 4, I figured now would be a good time to discuss how Deltarune deals with choices. I'm MangaKamen, and let's proceed. When you get down to it, Deltarune is an RPG, and for the old folks who don't understand the new lingo, that refers to a role-playing game. Typically, when playing an RPG, you're regulated into being into another role that isn't typically a one-for-one copy of yourself. You're inserting into the role that the game wants to put you into, and oftentimes that can be a bit of a blank slate with a backstory that allows you to really make your own tale. Whether you're a 10-year-old who's going on a journey to collect creatures of immense power that you'll clip onto your belt, or you get shot in the head.
What in the goddamn?
The point is that there's usually a bare-bones history with your character as you play the game, all for the sake of immersion. But with Deltarune, it has a bit of an oddity with it. We start the game taking some time to make a player character of sorts, but that's immediately discarded, and we're now taking control of Chris, someone as a predefined character when you go through the story. Throw in the fact that Toby Fox himself has stated pretty directly that there's only going to be one ending to be had in the game. Now, there's nothing wrong with having a conclusive ending for games, with there being a singular narrative conclusion. Hell, I'd often say some of my favorite games have a single ending to them, and I'm still able to get a lot out of the stories in them because of the experiences they give me. Though that begs the question, why offer choices in games if they don't ultimately affect the ending of the game? Why include something like the Snowgrave or Weird Routes in Deltarune if they don't actually mean anything in the grand scheme of things? After all, there's going to be just one ending, right? Well, it's really hard to say because when you look at the Steam page, you can see that there's a lovely little question mark next to that. And Ralsei even brings us up in the latest chapter about how there's going to be more than one ending. Really trying to get the theorists roaring with that one, eh, Toby? Who knows, maybe that one meme theory of Asgore will be true at this point.
Alright, end game!
But under the preconceived notion that there's just one ending, what's the point of offering choices to the player? What's the point of choosing to recruit the enemies in the Dark Worlds when you can just kick their asses? What's the point of taking Noelle and turning into a frigid weapon of destruction? Why the hell did my previous avatar look like Spamton? These are all great questions that ultimately we'll have to wait on answers on because Deltarune is an ongoing story. But this does raise a much better question. Does the lack of choice make you feel powerless, or is it being used to tell a specific story? It really comes down to Chris and the player, with this odd dynamic that you have when you're controlling Chris. Because here's the thing with gamers. We've been conditioned to expect things in gaming conventions. Like most of the time, pushing the A or X button on a controller will have the players accept what happens, with some of us mashing through dialogue boxes just to get on with it. I know several people who would like to kill a certain owl because the repeat option would be right at the top and you're forced to go through the long-winded explanation again and again because of your impatience. And when it comes to RPGs, there's this current assumption that the player character is an extension of the player, where while the character may have a past, they often get overwritten by the player's own wants, desires, or etc. And that can lead to some, interesting scenarios.
Take my chocolate, please, before I crush it.
But during chapters 1 and 2, Chris will actively remove the soul, aka the player, from their body. and will act independently, such as opening a dark fountain at the end of Chapter 2. Obviously, this suggests that Chris has motives that the soul isn't privy to, and you're an invading force to Chris. But this stuff is pretty much what you've heard before, right? Hell, if you've been on this channel, you know I've talked about this subject about 3 years ago. Yeah, well, how long that's been, huh? Of course, with Chapter 4 out, Chris is actively ripping us out of their body to communicate with someone and preventing us from getting a guitar. It's more to see that Chris could be an active antagonist rather than some random kid that we were assigned to control. It's something that I really wanted to applaud Deltarune for, because there have been plenty of games where you play as a villainous character. But with Deltarune, it really takes a different route with things here, where you the player are at complete odds with the character. Most role-playing games make you feel like you're the puppet master, pulling the strings to shape the story. Deltarune, though, you can slowly see with every chapter, Chris is cutting those strings one by one, with Chapter 3 and 4 pretty much showing the player that Chris can take over whenever he wants to. When playing games, most of the time we as gamers are used to the game bending to our wills. Pick a dialogue option and the world reacts appropriately. Most of the time.
Could you say that like Dr. Frankenstein? Ego, fetch me the brain.
No.
So when you have Chris rebelling against the player narratively, it makes you question what it means to have agency in the world, especially since it's got its own script. You can be the pacifist where you're recruiting everyone in the Dark Worlds like you're a blue-skinned Pokemon trainer, trying to catch them all, but the game reminds you about this uncomfortable truth. Your choices are just a noise in Chris's head. Chapters 3 and 4 really hammer this point in both sneaky and in-your-face manners, whether it be with Mr. Tenna's wild games, or choosing to scare either Susie or Noelle in the basement. The choices in them don't ultimately matter, of course. Those who have played the game know that these are probably the smaller choices you can make. Of course, when you consider things like the weird route and how the narrative basically doesn't change from that, save for some interactions you can have, you still do the same things. Like, if you decide to go with the Snowgrave route, you'll notice that Birdley is stuck in the hospital, or how you don't actually meet Noelle's mother, Carol, in the weird route. Though considering this,
That's a kid.
might have been a bullet dodged! Or the scene with Noelle, where while talking to Chris when the soul is removed temporarily, talking about an interaction we weren't privy to, you can take control again and Chris keeps stopping Noelle from talking until, well... it gets weird. Considering what can go about in this section, it can really make you feel like you're the antagonistic force in the game. The fact that Chris actively pushes against the player makes that clear, and how they're trying to save Noelle from your choices in the weird route raised the question.
Are we the baddies?
I mean, we're the ones messing with Chris's world, and you're complicit in it all. Most games, when choice is implemented, it's to have the players be empowered, that they can shape the world and the characters into what they want. Deltarune elects to make the player feel powerless, but not in a cheap, frustrating way, but in a way that forces you to think about what it really means to play with someone else's life. Almost as if the game is asking, what right do you have to decide for these characters? And considering that we've got 3 more chapters, with Chapter 5 coming out in 2026, it's a good bet that it'll be more of playing expectations. This is Toby Fox, the guy who will run you over with a car if you try to play Megalovania on the piano. So there's no doubt that the guy will keep doing things to keep his players on their toes. And he's always watching the community too, so who knows, maybe Asgore running over... yeah, don't want to get into that. I think it's important to take a look at SUSIE as a character when discussing choice in games, and how her role is a bit more complex and will pretty much break every RPG convention in the book, and being a pretty fun character at the same time helps. It's almost like she's the real main character of the game. In most RPGs, companions and side characters are there to support the player. They're the cheerleaders, the backup, maybe even the love interest the game deems it possible. SUSIE, though? She's an entirely different beast. Like how in the first chapter, she's often going against the grain, chilling and joining Lancer's side, ignoring commands, mouthing off, and running ahead when She's an assertive character, and while she does offer Chris support throughout the story, she clearly has her own thing going on. In a typical RPG, you'd expect her to follow your lead all the time, and considering that she started off as a bully, you'd think she'd get a redemption arc. But the game flips the script. SUSIE vibes, making decisions that ripple through the story, whether you like it or not. In the latest chapter, the focus on SUSIE does get better, with her learning how to do the healing magic. Though obviously not as effectively as Rouse does, but still being guided by Gerson, and eventually, even getting to face off against the secret boss fight in the chapter alone. Kinda. I mean, you're the one in control of the fight, but it'd be a little out there if you just sat there watching her battle. This isn't an anime! SUSIE's important in this regard because she reminds you that the world of Deltarune doesn't revolve around you. The game is daring you to rethink what a main character even is, especially considering that SUSIE does get a good portion of development throughout the game, and of course has some of the most iconic moments centered around her. And considering that Chris and you don't speak all that much, it allows SUSIE to really take that role. Throw in the fact that Gerson says that SUSIE has the power to rewrite fate, and well, that opens up a lot of possibilities. So, are you really the player character in this game, or are you a support role? Or are you an antagonist? That's really the question, isn't it? It's clear that Deltarune has choices in it, and while there is an overarching narrative, if Toby's words are to believe, there's only to be one ending, as opposed to Undertale's over 90 endings. So it's easy to see that your choices don't really matter in the game. But that in of itself doesn't matter. Deltarune isn't about giving the player unlimited power in this world, it's about telling a story that we the players can have a hand in. It's a story that challenges what games can be, making players wrestle with the idea that maybe, just maybe, you're not really the hero of this story. Maybe Chris is, or maybe they're not. Hell, maybe the dog that ran me over is the true evil mastermind behind everything. And it's this sort of speculation that I really had to involve myself into Deltarune. Games as a medium have so much potential, and thanks to games like Deltarune, we're actually getting a chance to dive into the unrealized narrative twists and turns that this medium can have, without really treading the ground of what's been done before. But then again, that's just me. Maybe I'm completely off base. That's totally possible considering that we've got 3 more chapters, and considering how things are going, Deltarune will probably be done by 2030. I joke, but I really enjoy Deltarune as a game, and I look forward to what Toby Fox brings to the table next. But let me know what you guys think. Who knows, maybe I'll talk about Deltarune's bosses next if this video gets some good reception. 2,000 likes and I'll be glad to do so. In any case, I'm MangaKamen. Thanks for watching, and proceed to